Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Live here on Keystroke Medium. I am Josh Hayes here with my co-hosts Chuck Manley and Scott Moon.
Scott on the bottom.
What
Scott's
up?
Scott's on the bottom.
Bottom
Bitch.
Down below.
And after a week-long or 2-week-long hiatus, actually, we missed last week. We are back with a brand new episode of Live. And look at all the people in the live chat, dude. It's been going nonstop.
It wasn't really so much 2 weeks as it was 14 days.
Well, yes. That's
if you
true.
round it.
You're carry the two. Yes, right. 14 days.
Maths at Keystroke.
As far back as I can go, Rick Partlow had the first comment. Hi, so he gets the Keystroke Medium golf clap of approval for the first comment. Thank you,
change
Rick.
to a fist pump.
No, well, just tone it down just a little bit, Scott. Just tone it down. All right, if you're first coming to the show for the first time tonight and you have not subscribed, please do so and hit that little bell. You'll get notified when we go live. We go live on Mondays. We go live on Thursdays. Walt goes live on Tuesday mornings. Kayleen goes live on Mondays for story time. Josh Gaio doesn't go live, but he does post videos every now and then. They're very super awesome long form interviews.
Yep.
You want to check those out. If you're just joining the show, hit the subscribe button. If you're listening on the audio feed, come over to YouTube at www.youtube.com/Keystroke Medium and subscribe. That's the show, guys. All right. Good night, everybody. Glad you're here, and we'll see you next week.
It was fantastic.
Bard was worried about my hat, so I had to put it on.
Yeah, get the hat.
He thought it was a sign of the end times that I was Sam's hat.
Yeah, you have to.
I think we should mention
wear it backwards like Sammy Jackson does. Over to the side. That's cool too.
It's almost like a beret.
It's cool too. Let's see. Luke's here.
Keystroke Medium berets.
There you go. I like that.
I would wear that.
Did you say berets?
Beret.
Berets.
Let's have it.
Tom Hoddle's here. Jake Clifton Slater's eating his ice cream. We have a brand new viewer, Alien.
Hello, Alien.
We've got two now mysterious viewers. We have Corvo and Alien, but I haven't seen Corvo on tonight, so we'll have to find out where he's at.
Corvo, I saw Corvo a second ago.
It's the mystery. Yeah, it's the mystery of Corvo.
Oh yes, mysterious. Tonight, guys, we were talking about the rules or lack thereof of fiction, and what you need to know to break them, or what you should consider when wanting to break them. Scott and I were having a conversation about. Actually, it was Memory Man that we were talking about, the David Baldacci thriller, and how in his first-person narrative, some of what he was doing, a lot of what he was doing was actually telling, and how that is different from like a normal third person where the commonly known method of writing is show, don't tell. And in this, he's telling. And so we had a kind of a conversation about how you could kind of get away with that in first person and not make it boring and all that. So we wanted to kind of talk about those kind of rules and how genre kinds of affects those rules at sometimes kind of like a Dune, where Dune is like third person, but it also head hops all over the place.
Yeah.
And we also wanted to kind of get into a lot of us write middle sci-fi, and what do you do in that genre that's typically fast-paced? How kind of deep in the weeds do you get with internal monologues or description of setting and that kind of thing, not bog down the narrative? So we're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff tonight. Hopefully it'll be a good show. Hope everybody has fun and joins in the conversation in the live chat, because if you don't, what's the point of being in a live chat? Chuck,
could be the dead chat.
Sorry.
Calm down, Chuck.
It's all fun and games if somebody breaks something or spills coffee on
break
the computer.
On all three of their computers?
Yeah, I did that. I'm a genius.
Let's talk about what we've been up to. I'm going to go first because I have something really cool. Oh, that's what I wanted to find. Nope, I can't go first. Hold on. Let me find it.
Come on, you have to go first.
Oh, what
I'm going to go committed to it. Can't go back.
So I'll go first. I'll go first. I just got to find it. Hold on. So a couple cool things happened to me this week. I am on a writing streak, as it were, which is not very impressive.
You're
considering,
streaking?
Oh, yes, they call him the streak.
Considering what I should be doing every day. But my writing streak is, my writing streak for the last 3 days, I have done just under 8,000 words in 3 days.
Sweet.
Which is
pretty sweet,
phenomenal
man.
for me for the last couple of months trying to get words out on Valor 3. I'm kicking through the third act, and it's really kind of coming along, and I've had some good ideas. Actually, we were doing some sprints today, and I did a sprint and finished a chapter and had absolutely no idea what I was going to do with the second chapter. And I was like, I got 20 minutes left in this sprint, and all I'm doing is sitting here going, I don't know what I'm supposed to write. The other cool thing is this. I'm going to see if I can
Kick of Valor.
share
Streak of Valor. Writing Streak of Valor.
Writing Streak of Valor. That's right. The super secret project that I have been talking about for the last couple of months is this. I don't know if I can make it bigger. That's kind of small. I was asked to write a short story in this anthology with Travis Taylor, Tim Zahn, and Michael Z. Williamson about a battle on the moon, or Battle Luna as the title's called. And in the anthology, the stories basically connect to each other and tell this kind of overarching story on the moon. It's set in the future. They've got some cool technology, but it's not to the point of like laser guns and stuff. But anyway, it was really cool because writing and being included in a book, and Tim Zahn, who I love Tim's Star Wars books, and his work with David Weber in the Honor Harrington universe is great. So I thought that I thought it was really cool, and I double checked to make sure that I could tell you guys about it, and I could. So that's my cool stuff. I finally got
you said several things.
Yes. Sorry, one thing. Oh, this is it. Two things. My writing, and then this. That was my several.
Sweet.
Minus one.
Like
yeah, cool time
stuff.
What about you, Chucky?
Oh, let's see. I'm plugging away at Jack Dark Book 2, averaging, I don't know, 1,500 words a day or so.
Nice.
I'm probably, I think after today, I'm about 18,000 words into it. And then the evenings, I'm still plugging away a little at Brace Cordova 3 to try and get that done. And I have committed myself to submitting a short story to Weird Tales. Jonathan Marbury's editing that these days, and he sent out a call for submissions, and I've had this idea bouncing around in my head for a long time now. So I am currently working on Galactic Murder Clowns 3.
I love it. I love the title so much. I love it.
I have to write it just because of that title.
So have you written Galactic Murder Clowns 1 and 2?
No, because that's not. That's part of it. It's not at the third in the series, but there's something in the story that ties back.
Okay. Nice.
That's so clever.
Sort of my homage to 80s camp.
I dig it.
I like it.
You got to say homage.
I got to say homage.
I was thinking of that. I
feel sophisticated when I say homage.
What's the guy who does the movie reviews?
There's a lot of them these days. Dude.
What, the drunken guy?
Come on, Siskel and Ebert back in the day,
not the drunken guy. The guy that says barely an inconvenience. No problem.
Ryan, what's his nuts from Screen Rant? Pitch meeting.
Pitch meeting, yeah. When he says that, and they're doing the things like they're talking about the Joker, like, so is it like an homage to the Taxi Driver, or are you just straight up lifting things? They're like, whichever one doesn't get me sued. And you keep saying homage. So when I think homage, I always think I was watching that.
You know what's great about pitch meeting is pitch meeting takes all the points that we as writers pick apart from these movies that we're like, this is ridiculous. Why would this even be in the movie? How could they think? And then they put it in pitch meeting as this, oh, it sounds great, because the producer's just completely oblivious to the fact that he's doing everything wrong. I love that.
It's good. It's great stuff. I did see one of my good things I'm going to put in here today is I saw that Bart of Today mentions Timothy Zahn of Valor.
That's true.
Possible book title.
That's true. Listen, we're going to have like an entire series
Like
of Valor
50
books
book
that are
series.
named. Look at
Just
this.
off these titles.
We got Streaks of Valor, which or Stakes of Valor. No, here's Streak of Valor. I
Streak of
read that
Valor.
Streaks of Valor, which is two completely different things. Spirit of Valor, and then Tom says Nude Beach of Valor is Star Wars story.
So good.
And
So
then
good.
of course Timothy Zahn of Valor.
So
I
really-
really like that. I'm going to use that as a title.
People that are coming to the show for the first time today need to go back about 50 episodes and watch all of the episodes that
Right.
mention the different Valor titles, and then you'll be caught up.
Every short story I'm going to have in the series is going to have a title pilfered from our episodes.
William Tyler
Yeah.
Davis says the Tiger King pitch meeting is on fire. I haven't seen that.
Oh, yes.
Is that a real thing? Is that a real thing?
It's
Oh,
good. Yeah, it
definitely
came out
watch
last week, I think. See, I subscribed and clicked the button. So every time they come out with a new video,
I think I did too, but
just like you should do on Keystroke Medium's YouTube
it
channel.
would be good.
What a masterful segue.
Yeah.
That
Hey,
was part
I
of
need
it.
to have that little animation that they play on their videos where the thing comes up and don't forget to subscribe. Ding, hit the button.
Yep.
And now like 8 people are halfway through the video right now and they're like, crap, I didn't subscribe. I'm going to subscribe.
Yep, they're in it. They're in it to win it. For
What's
Keystroke
crazy
Media.
is would be funny is like some of the long-term people that we have watching the show, I see them subscribing like all of a sudden. And I'm like, you guys haven't been subscribed at all.
It's so much easier. I bet
I'm not
Carol
gonna call you
Baskins
out.
didn't subscribe.
That's right.
Look what happened to her.
That's right. What about you, Scott? What do you got going on this week?
So I've been doing a lot of writing. Work has not been too crazy. I mean, in a way it has, but in a way it hasn't. Die Hard of Valor. That's also a good one from Bard.
True.
Abs of Valor.
Die Hard with a Vengeance. Die Hard of Valor with a Vengeance.
I think Abs of Valor actually made an earlier appearance in the title things.
Yeah.
No, I finished Invasion Day, which is my Alien Invasion book that I've been working on for a long time. I really like. Yeah, I decided I'm going to write a few more in that. Start outlining the next one. I think I'm hit 70,000 words on 13 Mercenaries, which is the book 2 in my Aethon series. That's coming along pretty good. If it works out, I'll finish book 3 in May, and hopefully sometime after June start getting those out there. So I'm very excited about those, and then just planning lots of other projects. It's good stuff.
That's another interesting thing we talked about yesterday, Scott. Coffee.
We did talk about coffee because I think we should start a coffee company. Totally my idea.
Totally Scott's idea.
Actually not.
We are looking into doing a Keystroke Medium brand of coffee, and so we wanted to gauge interest of the viewers. And look at Chuck. Look at him. Look at him.
I mean, it's one of the most important
I
things.
have many questions.
Yes. All the questions.
Josh was talking about this about probably 4 or 5 months ago.
It's obsessed French roast of
French roast
valor.
It's Roast of Valor.
Espresso of Valor.
Well,
Espresso.
Josh did like five months of pre-planning on this, and I came up with Keystroke Medium Roast.
Yeah.
It's my coffee. Right?
Yeah, he did. And then it took me 5 minutes to actually get what he meant. I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
Keystroke
medium roast.
Medium
I got
medium roast. So no, but I think it could be really cool. You had like kind of a breakthrough, I guess, from somebody we know who is doing this already, making a coffee brand and has some of the logistics worked out. So something I think
That's actually pretty good.
I think it could be fun.
Yeah, so we're looking into it. Hopefully I'll have some of the details ironed out in the next couple of weeks, but it seems pretty streamlined and pretty easy to get into, and there's not a whole bunch of front end work that I have to do. And I love coffee, and I know that I know a lot of authors that live on coffee, and
I'm pretty sure that you will be 5 times more productive in your writing drinking Keystroke Medium coffee as other coffee.
at least 5 times. At least.
Science.
We should actually brand one of the coffee 10 times more productive. And that way, like, it's the extra
get the
special.
words. You have like Black Rifle has like all those different ones. We could have like Get the Words.
Yeah.
Extra words coffee.
Yeah.
A writer's block breakthrough.
But you can't write 6,000 words on this pot of coffee.
Yeah. The Chris Fox 5,000 words per day coffee.
Yeah. Oh, Caffeine of Valor. I like that.
Caffeine of Valor.
Juan Valdez of Valor. Oh, also, yes, you could drink coffee in your Keystroke Medium coffee mug, which we have.
There you go.
Or a Keystroke Medium shirt.
That's true.
hat.
Lauren says the black roast of that's definitely happening.
Okay, so
Boom.
what you got to do is you got to have we got to launch a coffee brand, and then we got to
Mhm.
launch a whiskey brand, and
tequila brand.
our slogan
Rock.
will be coffee till 5, bourbon till bed.
I'm down with that.
Yeah.
I'm down. We just have to find a
Yeah.
bourbon manufacturer. You're on that, Chuck. You're on that duty.
Okay.
All right, let's talk about some writing stuff. Damn it.
Damn it.
Actually, you know what? Let's do the show sponsor real quick.
We only have 44 minutes left. We need to
Only
get to
44. And I'm drinking coffee. If you guys didn't notice, I'm drinking coffee.
Bourbon
tonight.
of Valor.
Bourbon
Canadian-
of Valor. That is true. Because I've been doing a lot of late night writing. Yesterday, I was up to like 1 a.m. I got like 3,300 words.
Whatever works, you know.
And then I was like, okay, let's see. Today's sponsor. Hold on, I got to do this properly. This episode of Keystroke Medium Live is brought to you by Salvation Rise Book 2 by Nathan Heisted and Devin C. Ford. The peace doesn't last long. With the newly received schematics of the gateway from Detroit, Tom and Alec head to the West Coast to recruit more manpower, but find that not everyone is willing to rise against the overseers. On Tom's order, Cole travels to Chicago to uncover a hidden enclave of roamers. Meanwhile, Lena must convince Pockets of Freedom to join the Reclaimers' cause. Dex is forced to return to the occupation and lie about his recent whereabouts. He sets off on a covert task that's pertinent to the Reclaimers' success of Doom. Salvation is the second book in the sweeping post-invasion series Rise by Devin C. Ford, the author of After It Happened, and Nathan Heisted, the author of the Survivors series. It just came out last week, and it's by Athon, and these covers are fantastic, as all of Athon books are. But Nathan Heisted and Devin C. Ford are amazing writers, and doing collab work the way they are is just
Working
crazy.
like champs too.
pushing it out.
Often dominating the Keystroke Rimo spreadsheet.
Oh god, they're so
They're good.
fast.
Yeah,
You are
they
the
run.
only one. Baird says he hates my new announcer voice.
I love it. I love it. Well, it's also very smooth. I think just the concept of Keystroke Medium Coffee has made you a better ad reader. So I mean,
See,
what
Lauren
could
knows
it do
what's
for writing?
I upped my reading game, is what I did. Oh, look at Corvo. Message removed with Valor.
That's pretty good.
Nice work. So yeah. Can I put up the covers? Let's see. Yeah, I can share this. Let's see. See if I can make it big. Here, let's do this. Screen share. So I have to scroll down a little bit so you can see the whole thing, but gosh, it's beautiful. Whoever does these paintings.
They're excellent.
And actually, Steve and Rhett have been on top of this. They've been putting the names on the left-hand side of the cover because Audible has that little stupid stripe on the right corner.
Yep.
And all of my Terra Nova books on Audible are by Richard Fox and Jay Yellowstripe.
See, that's a pro book production tip. And, you got to learn that the hard way.
That's right.
I told Nathan when I saw that
waiting for Yellow Stripe of Valor to pop up.
Yellow Stripe of Valor for
Yellow
sure.
Stripe of Valor, that's true.
Subtitle
Okay.
Laundry Day.
Huh?
Nothing. Go ahead.
Okay, so let's talk about POV and genre for a second, because that's the first note I have written down. So the first thing on my page goes first. Scott, we talked a little bit about this off air, and we mentioned it very briefly about Memory Man. Yeah. What when you think about your chosen genre of mill sci-fi and then sci-fi in general, what are some rules that you've seen that carry through, and what are some rules that you have broken in your own fiction?
Well, so one of the big things with mill sci-fi and to a certain degree space opera is pacing is very important, and action and character interaction and dialogue. And so you're going very fast. It's very much a showing, not telling, like everybody says. And that's one of those mantras or whatever that everybody puts forward as being a sacrosanct rule of writing is show, don't tell. Anybody who knows anything about writing coaching, that's the first thing they tell you. But if you go back and look at some of my favorite books, a lot of Stephen King, we mentioned the Memory Man and those, they actually do a lot of telling, so it can be obviously be done well. But I think it's dependent on genre because you don't see it much in military sci-fi. And I think the ones that I've done it might have been where I'd lost some readers in my early days by over
not
explaining
telling or
stuff,
by
over explaining stuff, not having that really kind of snappy bang 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 action beats.
So I agree. But then I've read and maybe it's just the time, like the current generation of readers, because I remember reading like even some of the newer Honor Harrington stuff, but the older Honor Harrington stuff, although you'd have a lot of telling in those books and a lot of telling through conversation. But you're right, in today's, and I don't know if it's a difference between the indie market or the traditional market or what, but you look at a lot of the indie pubbed sci-fi and mill sci-fi books, they're very much bang 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 bang. But I think you can get away with a little bit of telling, so you can, I mean, I have a lot of things that happen in the Valor books that happens off screen, as it were, or off page, as it were. And then I go back and kind of work it into the narrative somehow, but it's actually a telling, it's not a showing. But I've had an issue with the last Valor book that I've been struggling with is the white space, right, where you have people doing stuff, but the scene description isn't really there at all. Have you seen in recent mill sci-fi stuff where that is a big issue, or that you think that we need more of it or less? What do you think?
Well, okay, so, and I was reading the live chat too there while we were talking, but there's something weird going on over there. I'll come back to that. But so, like I said that initially with the not telling, but Legionnaire has a lot of telling. I mean, it's first person present tense,
right?
But there's a lot of stuff where the point of view character is just telling stuff and telling his views about the politics. But it's it's extremely well done. And I think that's part of the key. I think there's a rule that it's not subsumes, would that be right? That's more important than show don't tell is, does it engage your reader and entertain them?
Yeah.
Because sometimes, and I also think that a lot of times people will be criticized for head hopping and things, when what it is they're actually maybe unknowingly writing in omniscient. Right. Because you can jump from viewpoint to viewpoint in a limited omniscient viewpoint.
And it was interesting that you mentioned that, because we were talking about the Memory Man, and then we started talking about like thrillers, and you mentioned kind of accidentally slipping into omniscient from a third.
Yeah, a lot of them do that.
Everything okay there?
Felt like the house was going to fall over there for a minute. But like where like in some thriller books where you have the main character do something, and then at the end of the chapter it says something like, and that was the last time he was ever going to walk across the street. Well, that sentence is not actually third person, that's omniscient, because it wouldn't be something that the character knows.
Outside of his. Because when's the last time you thought that? And that's the last time
right. The last time I'm going to walk across the street.
And I'm waiting for Chuck, because I know you got probably a lot of insight to all these things, but I noticed that. So where it first really popped out to me when listening to the Memory Man was it's been very firmly established. Well, there's like whole chapters, it's just him.
Yeah.
And it's just one person, and he's going through the events. So there's lots of telling, because you can't know it. It's really artificial to try and show a lot of stuff. It becomes very Maiden Butlery, start adding people in just to give information. And sometimes easier just to tell it. But there's a scene where it's very firmly, for probably 5 chapters, has been nothing but his point of view. And then like the last probably 2 paragraphs of it, he leaves. And then his partner does all this stuff. And then he comes back and it's him again. Because it talks about, the line was, he didn't see Captain So-and-so trying to pull her back. Yeah, she reached out to grab his arm to keep him from going away in this fit of rage or whatever like that. So it was clearly not his point of view. And that's where I kind of started keying in on it and started thinking about it.
Yeah, well, I think I've read all the Amos Decker books, and number one, Baldacci has a tendency to tell a lot. That's just the way he writes.
Sure.
But at their core, the Amos Decker books are all mysteries, and I think that when you're writing a mystery like that, you're kind of playing a game with the reader. You know, you're kind of playing this, can you figure it out? Because that's part of the fun. I love whodunits for that very reason, because I want to try to figure it out before the big reveal at the end. So I think that in mysteries like that, there's going to be a little more telling, because you, at certain points in the story, you're going to want to go back over the facts to sort of play fair with the reader, and then have that one or two little things that are apparent, but they have to sort of catch. And then that's what is in the big reveal of, you know, who done it and so on and so forth. So how much you tell is very genre dependent. I think mysteries, you're going to tell a little more. I think big sweeping space operas or epic fantasies or historical fiction, you're going to tell a lot more, because those readers tend to want more detail about the worlds that you're in.
That's a great point.
And so the trick, as Josh pointed out earlier, is, you know, there are certain rules I have for myself, and one of them is thou shalt not bore the reader. Perfect. So if I'm writing
somebody should write that down.
Yeah, a sweeping epic space fantasy, well then yeah, I'm going to do a little more telling, but I'm not going to do it ad nauseum.
Right.
You know, that's the trick, is knowing when enough is enough and when enough is too much. You know, it's so as far as showing and telling goes, you don't want to just tell everything,
right?
But depending on your genre, it's going to be a sliding scale. The second point I want to bring up as far as showing and telling goes is that if you're writing, like my Jack Dark series that I'm currently working on, it's all first person. I'm in Jack's head the entire time, and he's talking to the reader. You know, it's always his point of view. It's always his voice. You know, there is no third person stuff to it. So in situations like that, there's going to be more telling too, because you've just got one character to work with. So like when he's talking about how his magic works, you know, when he's dealing with this one element in chapter 3, he'll say, oh yeah, and this does this because of that. And then when something else comes up in chapter 7, oh yeah, and that happened because this happens, and I had to do it this way, and you know, and stuff like that. So there's going to be more telling in that case too, because if you've just got the one character, it's harder to show when there's not. Well,
and in first person, anything in the character's head is on the table.
It's being told, right?
Because it's known to him. It is, if the reader is truly in their head, then they should have access to anything that he thinks. So it should be fairly natural, as long as you do it in an engaging way, an entertaining way.
Exactly. I think the trick for first person is you have to have, the character has to have enough of a personality in the way in their voice to keep it engaging. And again, you have to know when enough is enough, and you don't want to just, you know, just rant and go on and on and on and on about something you can sum up in 4 or 5 sentences.
Yeah.
So those are times I think the show don't tell thing isn't necessarily a hard. I don't think there are really any hard and fast rules besides thou shalt not bore the reader,
right?
And that's it.
They writing teachers like to. It's an easy rule to teach. What were you going to say, Josh?
I was going to say Leo Vaccaro has an interesting question about breaking up the exposition with action. What do you think about breaking up exposition with action? I think that you could do that to a point, but you don't want to. I don't think you want to do your entire exposition delivery during an action scene.
You got to make sure you don't fall into a predictable rhythm, because then it kind of feels like
But the action scene doesn't have to be a battle scene either. It could be a conversation where two people are doing
conversation
something
is action technically.
Yeah, and then that can be, you know, when you talk about exposition as the non-fun part, where you're like describing a setting, and then you go into how the castle got there and how many cows they had to kill to feed the workers that built the brick. All that stuff is boring and it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
That is the exposition that you don't want. The exposition that this castle was raided by a lord last week, that may be pertinent to the story. That's something that you're gonna have in there, and you can do that through dialogue, or you can just, maybe the character that you're following knows this, so when they come in here, they're thinking about what has just happened to this castle or this whatever it is, and that is exposition, but it's necessary for the narrative, so we understand what's going on.
And by necessary, you mean something bad is going to happen if that information is not conveyed in some way.
Yeah.
Well,
go ahead, man.
I was just going to say that there's sometimes where you have to have that kind of exposition, regardless of what POV or genre you're in, to set up what you're doing later on. If you leave it out just because you know it and the characters know it, and it's going to lead to something later in the book, when the reader gets that later point and there wasn't a setup earlier, they're going to be kind of confused, or it's going to be like Deus Ex Machina.
Confusion is bad.
Yeah, you want to break up information dumps like that, because I mean, if you have a big block of exposition, that's pretty much what it turns into, is an info dump. And I like to, a lot of times, I like to utilize what I think of as stage direction, where it's like, like today, I was writing a scene where I introduced kind of a very, very peripheral character, but he's kind of flamboyant, so I wanted to give him a little stage time. But like when Jack first encounters him, he's stocking a shelf from a case of gin because he owns a liquor store. And, they get to talking, and I talk about how he says this as he stood up, and what he said conveyed information. And then, just little actions like that, just to sort of keep it kind of active and moving in the reader's mind, instead of just sitting there going, da, 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 da. If they can see in their head that there's some motion attached to this information being conveyed, I think that makes the narrative flow a little bit better for readers.
Yeah, and you have to use.
I could be totally wrong about that. I don't know.
Well, and it's interesting that you mentioned stage direction, because I've had a couple conversations with Steve Bowler where specifically he does not read Mill Sci-Fi. So when he edits and goes through my Mill Sci-Fi, a lot of the comments he has for me are, there's a lot of stage direction here. Well, he's specifically mentioning some of the fight scenes or some of the tactical movements that you describe in the book. And while you could probably say they made their way through the ship and just flat cover that, in the genre that I'm writing, the actual tactical movements, that's what people want. So the increased stage direction in that genre is specifically for that. Now, if you're writing a legal thriller and the lawyer is walking through City Hall, you don't have to describe all of that. You can just suffice it to say he entered and got to the courtroom. But if you're doing some tactical movement where you want the reader wants to be engaged in that tactical group, that's something specific to the genre. That's good.
That's
stage direction.
Yep.
Yeah, and I again, though, I think that goes back to, you have to keep in mind who you're writing for, what genre you're in, and what the people who read that genre expect. And that's going to determine the degree to which these rules apply to what you're doing.
Rick brings up a good point. We should probably cover this. He talks about he likes books where they keep you in the dark for a while. So when you're doing, when you're giving information to the reader, one, it needs to be information that's interesting and important, but you don't want to give everything. There's an editing book and I have over on my shelf, and it talks about ROE, resist, or it's RUE, resist the urge to explain.
Right.
You don't have to explain everything. You want to be clear, and you don't want to confuse your readers, but sometimes you want to, you have to leave it all out. You can't give it to all at once, because part of the excitement is finding out what is this? What's the mystery?
And you want to give them what they need for that moment.
Right.
But really nothing beyond that.
Otherwise, you're just writing a dictionary.
Right. Especially if you're, like I said before, if you're writing like a mystery or something like that, where there's a big big kind of finale thing at the end, you definitely you want it. You want to make details subtle, and you don't want to explain too much because you can give away the ending that way.
Right. Or you can, well, yeah, and every piece of information you put into a story is a fact check you have to remember later. And if you're writing, 6 300,000 word fantasy novels, you're going to have readers that say, well, but he didn't have a zipper on that jacket in book 2. How come he's zipping stuff up? He was using Velcro. So if the fact's not necessary, don't put it in there because you're going to have to keep track of that data point.
And somebody will pin you down for it.
Absolutely. That's
Yes, Otto has a good point here. I don't know how to.
Which one?
This is the most recent thing. Sometimes a little exposition, I'm assuming he means, can make the setting a character. Connolly's good at that. Connolly being the guy that writes the Bosch novels. He does make Los Angeles very much a character, and he does that by talking about locations like Angel Flight and things like that, that really give the city an identity. And that's a really good point. But even with that, though, you don't want to go too far. You better be really good at it if you're going to be real heavy on it. Right.
And I think
because that stuff can get boring quick.
Well, the difference between what Connolly is doing and let's just say science fiction and mill sci-fi is, typically speaking, we're not writing about real places. We're making them up. And so when he is describing or giving the history of those places, he's doing it from a factual standpoint of somebody can actually go there and look at Angel Flight. One of the cool things, I was ghostwriting a novel last year that was a present day thriller, and this particular character worked at the CIA, and I wanted to do some cool exposition in that to show his knowledge of what was going on at the agency, or what cool things happen. And so I did a lot of research on the actual facility of the CIA, and they have a I can't even remember what it's called now, but basically it's a cipher. It's a sculpture that this mathematician, encryptologist, or whatever built, and there's 3 ciphers on this sculpture, there's 4 ciphers on this sculpture, and only 3 have ever been decoded. There's still one that has not been decoded yet by all these like huge brainiacs in the CIA and NSA. No one's been able to crack this last cipher. I put that in the story as just a little cool, like, did you know that? And I think some readers, when you're, but the problem is with mill sci-fi and sci-fi, I could say that this thing's cool over here, but it's really only cool to me because I made it up, and it doesn't really have any connection to the reader, because the reader really doesn't know what you're talking about. They're just reading it and hoping that you know what you're talking about, or hoping that it has something to do with the story. That's my, I don't know. That's just me when it comes to.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, and I think that's why so many times in fantasy and sci-fi, when you have a location, it has like this really big history. Yeah. Because you want it to be memorable. You want it to be something the reader can latch on to. Like what I'm working on now, I've got set in Atlanta. And so I've been doing all this research on Atlanta and things that have been happening there. And I put, there's this, they've got a Flatiron building in downtown Atlanta. It's the only one in the city. It's called Flatiron City. And I went back and I found the history. Well, I stuck an important location for the story in Flatiron City, and I just kind of filled in a little bit of the history of the city like that, but again, kept it very, paragraph tops, not a ton of, I didn't go back to the day it was founded and all this stuff like that. I don't think you have to go that far.
Nathan mentions the Chekhov's gun scenario, which is the rule probably most people know. If you put a gun in Act 1, you better use it by Act 3. Act 3. So that goes for lots of things. Like sometimes just the because I also read stories for the ambiance sometimes. Just like when you read a Connolly book, you just kind of, there's a certain entertainment value just to the way he presents it, the beauty of it, and then just the style of writing, the voice of it.
Tone.
But a lot of stuff, like if you give a character a magical sword, or he put him in need of a magical sword in a fantasy, then you got to resolve that. That's now that's now an open loop, and it's got to be
Right.
closed or dealt with somehow. So putting in unnecessary detail is obviously a danger.
I think one of the only stories that I can think of, the only authors rather that I can think of that has done this well, in a way that didn't seem kind of superfluous or like just kind of blah, was some of the settings in Game of Thrones that have a historical significance to the world, like Harrenhal. You know, there's a lot of places in, you know, even Valyria and I know I'm losing the name, but he created these things, and there's a huge historical meaning to a lot of these locations, but a lot of the times he'll like space that out. Like he doesn't just give you this is what happened at Harrenhal in one big thing. You'll get a little piece from someone in a conversation over here, and then maybe 2 books later you'll get another piece. And if you're paying attention, then you can put that together and have a broader understanding of what happened and what's going on with those places. I think that's really cool. And if you have places that you want to have connection to your readers or to your story, space it out and even kind of do it. It doesn't even have to be factual. It doesn't have to be accurate. A lot of the stuff in Game of Thrones is biased and wrong because it's
which character it's coming from,
right? Because they might have heard a wrong story or a different story or a different way, and so when they portray it, they say it differently than another character does, and that kind of gives it a little bit more of this real historical recount.
He usually does that where you see the actual scene, like say you see the Blackwater, but then after that you'll see other characters misrepresent it.
Right.
And so it's easier to keep track of because you know what the right way is.
Right.
But not always. So some of those things are interesting. J. Clifton Slater says, historical adventure is a study in resisting over-description while including ancient tech. That's definitely true. Reading what's our Edelhart. Mark Edelheit. His books are also the same thing, very much historical. I love historical fiction.
Well, but
I think in those
over description,
like the description of how it worked back then.
It depends. It's genre specific again.
Yeah, that's true.
There are some writers who have done very, very well with over description, in my opinion. Tom Clancy.
Yeah.
I mean, he got deep into the tech stuff in those novels, but people
Ken Follett the same way.
Ken Follett does that. Clive Cussler even did it with a lot of his Dirk Pitt and Numa books.
Yeah.
So that was interesting that you mentioned Tom Clancy because Tom Clancy did a lot of telling, but he did a lot of that kind of limited third person where like you're with Jack Ryan and you don't know what else is going on,
right?
You know, whatever the Russians or whatever, but then let's just, for sake of reference, Hunt for Red October, they shoot a torpedo and it hits the submarine, and then Clancy takes the reader inside the internal mechanisms of the submarine and tells them that a bolt breaks loose from the boiler plate somewhere and smashes through, and there's no character at all to see what's happening.
Definitely,
but he's telling you what.
Yeah, it's cinematic. It's basically a cutscene, and it's just a visual description. You know,
I tell you, that was one of the. And it still is kind of the hardest thing for me to get over because writing mill sci-fi, I want to talk about like ships coming out of hyperspace, right? But now I'm so ingrained with these rules of limited third, where if a character's not there to experience it's not available to the reader. And so I want to be able to show a empty plot of space and then something appears and a starship comes through. And it's hard for me to break that rule of third person, kind of the way that Tom Clancy did with that stuff.
Yeah.
And
not do the cinematic thing that we all grew up with.
But I think that's cool. Like I like that cinematic stuff. Like that's interesting.
Just gotta figure out a way to do it.
Done well. That's the thing, though. You know.
Done well. Yeah. In an entertaining manner, not boring. Thou shalt not.
Thou shalt not bore the reader.
Yeah.
And Rick does have a good point there. He wrote 20 pages doing the nuke.
That's what I mean. He
nuke bomb.
overdid it a lot.
Yeah, there was some parts that were all right, and some parts I'm like, I'm not trying to be a nuclear physicist here. I just want to find out when the terrorist is going to blow up the
I
stadium.
want to know if they've destroyed Indianapolis or whatever.
Yep. We had I think Michael Fuchs, what's his name? The zombie guy that does the Arisen series. We had him on, and I listened to a whole bunch of his books. Were really well, of course they're narrated by R.C. Bray, I think, but he had that in that genre had kind of the military porn where like if a character comes in there by a few pages in, you know everything about this character, what his military background and MOS is, all of his weapons, which one's his favorite, how they work, what type of ammunition they're carrying. But for some reason it's entertaining and it works. But I don't want that in every story. In that one, it was very engaging. There was lots of other tension in it.
Yeah, for military books, period. I mean, any kind of military action books, a lot of people, they eat that stuff up, man.
Yeah.
That was actually one of my other notes is the characters, like how deep do you go when you describe them, like, what they're wearing, what their specialty is, like how long they were in whatever school they were going to, or how they learned special weapons and stuff like that. Like you're saying, like they give their CV of their military career, and sometimes that is really cool. But other times you're like, if I did this for every character, I think my readers would get really bored of me doing that.
Yeah.
As we're interviewing or introducing characters.
I should probably ask you. I don't know if this might get us in trouble, but what's let me ask you a question, Josh. What does a mule look like?
I have absolutely no idea what. So this is funny because this goes back to the white space. Is that in the Valor books, I know exactly what my assault drop shuttles look like in my head. I've got concept art pictures and descriptions in my head. I know what they look like. So when I write them in the book, I know how people are going to sit in them. I know how the engines work. I know how the outside turrets work. When I was writing the Terra Nova series, there are some military shuttles in that universe that are called mules. And to this day,
they're very prominent.
They're used all the time. And after reading 9 books in his main series, the Armor series, and writing 4 books in the universe and using mules, I have absolutely no idea what mules look like at all. And so that's where I'm coming from when I get some of that white space stuff, where I'm like, does it matter? Do people really read that? And to your point earlier, Scott, where you were talking about not being specific, I go and sometimes in my head, or when I start writing, I'm like, he was 14 feet away. And then I'm like, it doesn't matter how far he was a little bit away, or something like that. Like, just to keep it non-specific. Cause I don't know, like what, I mean, knowing what a mule looked like or did not look like did not affect my. You
had to know how they function sometimes. Cause like there was a couple of times where the outline, you'd get the outline for a chapter and be like, Garrison gets in the turret and fights off a ship. Well, has to have some sort of defensive turret.
Right.
And you're like, okay, where is that? And so it might make a difference. J. Clifton Slater brings up the pig dog. I have a pretty good idea what the pig dog looks like from Dark Landing books. But what I know about the pig dog is he's smarter than he sounds. He grunts and farts a lot. And he's a pig dog.
And he's a pig dog.
Very fierce. So one of my favorite animal characters.
To play D&D with that guy.
Yeah, Pig Dog.
Pig Dog. Yeah,
a guy who fit that description.
Yeah.
So I got one for.
Go ahead, Chuck. No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask you. I'm a very dedicated one head per scene kind of guy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Have y'all ever seen a situation where that rule was effectively broken, where they head hopped in a scene, scene, and it effectively worked?
Let me go on a slight diatribe from that. So
a lot of times, rant.
No, it's, and now if I can come up with the example, but a lot of times I'll they'll have some characters and one of them will do something, say, he knew he had to go to the right, but that's not the main character. I'm like, you're head hopping. And I'm like, you're not head hopping because you can infer that he knew he had to go right because he went right. You know what I mean? So sometimes I'll have editors and betas like, you're head hopping. I'm like, not really, because you make assumptions. You know,
Yeah.
like I'm thinking, well, Chuck's interested. Papa Chuck's interested because he leaned forward, and I can see that he leaned forward, but I can't read your mind. So, but back to your initial question, that's my little side thing. I didn't articulate that well. We'll come back to it in another episode.
No, because I do that too. When you're in a specific headspace of your POV, and he's talking to someone, and you say, or in your narrative, you're like, the other person leaned forward, obviously interested.
Right. But
do you have to put that in? Because a lot of times I'll put that in there, or I'll just say he leaned forward, interested.
Right.
And is that head hopping, or is that just?
And so I've had people say you need to put it seemed like he was interested. Well, I'm like, well, you don't really need to put he seemed. It's boring. It's unnecessary words. For me, I would leave that out.
Right.
But a lot of people say no, and usually I just go with whatever my editor says. You know, if they say clarify,
I tend to agree with that though. If you're staying in one head and they can't know for sure,
yeah.
You know,
some things are
like
obvious.
You like you said, people make us, and this applies to characters too. People make assumptions.
Yeah.
And you know, somebody could lean forward and you assume they're interested, or maybe they're just faking it. You don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
You know.
It just depends. So, I mean, we should come up with some specific examples, because I have some that I think are much more clear than I'm making it. But so,
yeah, well, see, I'm a firm believer in one head per scene, because it applies to the second cardinal rule of storytelling in the Book of Chuck, and that is thou shalt not confuse the reader.
Absolutely.
And
the only time that I'll jump in between, and it kind of depends on the book that I'm writing, because in Valor, the chapters are split between character POVs. So I don't generally have two POVs in one chapter, but if I'm going to do that, I'll have a line break.
Have a break.
And you'll know that you're swapping in a chapter. You'll have a line
I'm talking
break.
about scene.
Yeah, no,
you can have a scene if you have a scene break in a scene.
Right, but there is a break.
But
there's a break, right?
Okay, I'm talking about without a break.
Oh, without a break.
So what's the guy who writes the Jason Bourne books?
Ludlum.
I'm pretty sure, and it's been a while since I read them, but I'm pretty sure him and there's several other writers kind of that generation, and some of the early sci-fi stuff that I went back and read some classic sci-fi, and they're back and forth all the time. They don't give a shit. You know, you're in one person's head, you're in one person's head, you're in this person's head, then you're learning how this person felt about what this person just said, and it goes back and forth, and I don't like it. I think it's lazy, and I think it's can confuse the reader. And
I think that was that generation of writing too. That generation of mystery thrillers.
Herbert did some of that too.
Yeah, Herbert did that a lot
for
too.
Sure.
But it robs tension. That's one of the things is because if you can know what's in everybody's head, then as a reader, you're like, well, why don't you just tell me? You told me last time. Why aren't you telling me right now? Why are you holding back? You're cheating.
Nathan says Ludlum was almost literary in many ways, and it's very true.
I listened to the first Jason Bourne book on audiobook, which is my mistake. And but if you listen to it, he says the word psychotic like 80,000 times in that book, and he's like, he was psychotic. It was the most psychotic thing. He just couldn't stop being psychotic, and it made me want to die when I was listening to it. So. I never read the book.
You can head hop without being confusing if you're third omniscient and you do it right, which is true.
Yeah,
it is true, but you have to be able to hold that omniscient through the book. If there's something that is happening, but you want to keep it from the reader, and you purposely are keeping it from the reader, but it should be known, then you're doing it wrong.
Like and it's.
It's cheating. If you what is it? Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That's almost perfect use of omniscient. Almost, because it's very back and forth between the characters, but there isn't anything that's hidden from the reader.
Yeah.
Yep. Agreed.
And that's one of the reasons I like using third limited, is because I can cheat and do things that the characters don't know about. Or like, we mentioned in the Star Wars breakdown we did a couple weeks ago, when Chewie dies and then he's brought back and the viewers know it, but the characters don't. That's a horrible use of perspective to ruin the tension in your story.
It really was.
Because
go ahead.
but I was just to say, because if you want the tension to be there, you want the characters to be as tense as you are. And if you know something the characters don't, then the character's tension isn't transposed to you. Like they're tense and you're
Right.
like, just
Well,
get over it.
you're supposed
Because
to be with the character and following
Right.
the character. So what the idea is for you to feel some modicum of what they're feeling.
right.
But if you know more than them, unless you know that there's a threat coming,
Yeah,
and you're
that's
worried for them, that's
Yes.
different.
Right.
But but again, though, the rules aren't necessarily concrete. There are exceptions. There's wiggle room. It's art.
So I hear you
Or
saying
if you
is,
know that the character is making a decision, but it's the wrong decision, and you know it's the wrong decision, but the character believes it's the right decision, and you know when they make that decision, it's gonna mess with them.
Yeah.
like
and then
for
they
But you
make that
don't
decision,
know
you're like,
exactly
"No!"
how.
Right.
And that's where the tension comes from.
Right.
Right. So, for example, if they were not going to put coyotes in their book,
It doesn't.
and you knew that was a bad idea,
Well, that's
Yeah.
the one rule you should never break.
Don't
Every
ever
book
break that
has to
rule.
have a
not put-
coyote of some form.
never not put a coyote in there.
Secondarily,
Decision.
badgers.
Badgers,
Badgers
yes.
always
honey
hit.
badgers, honey badgers,
Honey badgers.
specifically, because they don't give a shit.
Jake Lifton
good.
said when we were talking about head hopping battle scenes where there are many gruesome deaths, scene breaks within scene breaks. I think
You
that
gotta do it
like,
well,
what you're
so-
talking
Yeah,
about
that's
is
it.
just,
You just
making sure that the reader is on the same page that you are when you're
Yeah.
going through that thing.
and
Um,
timing. Keeping
Yep.
the pace, doing that. That's
So
super
basically, we're saying
important.
is go write your book, don't fuck up.
Yeah. Get it.
Whatever
Make
you
it
do-
perfect the first time.
Yeah, exactly. No mistakes.
So we talked
zero
about,
defects.
several rules specific to mostly our genres that we write and most of the viewers and listeners. But really when it boils down to it, you can throw all that shit out the window. Because when it really boils down to it, it's your story, and you're going to write it the way you want to write it. And as long as you keep it consistent and you stick to the rules that you've developed for that story and that universe, just write it how you want to write it. And the people will decide whether they like it or not. I always kind of go into a project and say, this is how I want to do it. But if something comes up where I have learned a different technique or I want to try something new, then I do that, and I don't constrain myself to what I originally set forth to do with the book. Just like my Valor series, man. I set up the first book and to thinking it was just gonna be a kickoff book, and then I was gonna do something different. Well, then it turned into a trilogy, and I had to basically set up a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't anything that I was expecting, and it turned out okay. So
Never know.
Just I would say know the typical rules and expectations of the genre you're trying to write in, and definitely, we could have said this all night, read in your genre and understand what the people that are selling books in your genre are doing and why they're doing it. And if it's a rule that you think you can twist or break and it's great, do it. Break it.
Take feedback,
Yep.
all that stuff.
I
I think we should have a staring contest for the last 54 seconds of the show. No, it's a terrible idea. I'm terrible at staring contests.
Everybody let me know in either in the Facebook group or in the comments. Do it in the Facebook group if you think you'd be interested in some Keystroke coffee. I think that it's going to be a really cool thing. Mortgage payment of valor. Where'd it go? There it is.
Staring contest of valor.
Right there. Staring contest of valor.
Coffee
Badger
of Valor.
don't give
Coffee
a
of
shit
Valor.
about Valor.
We are
Yeah.
going to have a Valor blend if we go forward with the coffee. But I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be interesting. Thank you guys for coming and hanging out with us. Apologies for missing last week. We all had some stuff going on and family stuff and just didn't happen. So hopefully we will
coronavirus.
blame it on the coronavirus. It's from China. I laughed my ass off when he said that. I don't even care. I don't even care what side. He said it's from China. Laughed hysterically.
Wow.
I will buy some. Leo says he'll buy some KSM coffee if I can get a discounted mug. We might be able to work out a package. A
It might be
package.
a package.
That's right.
Endless-
Thanks everybody
endless
for coming to
possibilities.
hang out with us tonight. It's been a fun episode. If you're catching us on the audio feed, come and hang out with us live on Monday nights, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. Lauren and Kayleen will be here on Thursday night for the Writer's Journey, and then tune in with Walt Rebillard tomorrow morning on the Facebook group for Coffee and Concepts. Our short shows, very, very tightly organized, completely unlike our show. Not at all.
It's very
but
awesome.
so
I went and hung out with him last week. It was loads of fun.
it's good times. Walt's great.
He's a good host.
All right, well, we're going to get out of here for tonight. Thank you, guys, and come back next week. We're going to talk about some reading. We're going to talk about some writing, and, of course, everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium. See you.
Later, guys.